Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Demystifying Money. I'm thrilled to be joined by my friend, Dr. Krystal Conner. She's a certified life coach, the host of the TV show The Breakthrough, and also the host of the How to Be a Dangerous Woman podcast. Thank you, Krystal, so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
So I love the name of your podcast, How to Be a Dangerous Woman, because I think it's
Mhm.
an interesting concept that a lot of women might instantly be like, oh, absolutely, or oh my God, no. I'm terrified by the thought of even being considered a dangerous woman. So
Right.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you got your start and decided to go into coaching and to become a dangerous woman who teaches people how to be more confident and live a better life.
Yeah. So I got into coaching almost by accident, I would say. It was really based off of my own issues. Going into my 40s, I had so much just confusion because I felt like, you know what, I did everything that everybody said. I went to school and I got, these degrees and I have this great job and I have the family and the two kids and I didn't have a picket fence, but you know the deal. You know what they say that we're supposed to do. And I felt like, I've done all of these things, but I still feel like something is missing. I still feel like, there's more. I'm supposed to be doing something more and I couldn't figure it out. And I just felt like I was treading water. That's literally the best way I can explain it, is like, I'm just here, let's just get through it. Right. And I started working with my coach. She's still my coach to this day. I didn't know she was a life coach. She was working with a friend of mine who went to her church, and I just started talking to her about all my issues. And I had a lot of them and still do. And the relief that I felt and the breakthroughs that I experienced because of our time working together and our interactions and the things that she was able to bring to the surface was so life-changing for me that I remember leaving one of our sessions and I was like, every woman I know like needs this. They need somebody to show them themselves. They need somebody to point out their blind spots. They need somebody to, hold them accountable with compassion and with love. And they need somebody to see the bigger version of them that sometimes we can't see because we're so caught up in, who we think we are. And so after that, I was like, okay, how do I become a life coach? Went through the process of getting certified, and here we are today.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's, you know, I know that was never my intention to get certified in coaching, and it's funny how I think just somebody that teaches you how to think a little bit differently, or maybe has you kind of identify certain things, because I think a lot of us don't feel like we have any blind spots because they
Right,
are blind spots
right,
and we don't know they're there, but all of us do. I think it's very difficult for somebody to go through life being perfectly self-aware
right.
and, in control of their emotions at all times. And so I think that's, it's such an interesting skill. And I do agree that a
Mhm.
lot of everybody could benefit from that objective, outside of your brain kind of opinion. But you're
Right,
right, I do talk to a lot of people, men and women, who feel like who they are on the outside doesn't match how they feel
exactly.
internally. So, what are some things that you've noticed when people maybe come to you, and is it that feeling of wasted potential, or what are you hearing more, especially lately? I think there's a lot of we've come through a difficult period of time.
Hmm.
I think we're in a tense environment in so many different ways, in the workforce and politics, all of these things. Like, when you're talking to people, what are some of the things that you're hearing over and over again that some people who are listening might say, yeah, that's me?
Hmm. One of the things that I always hear from clients, from friends, from just women that I talk to, there is this very strong belief, and I think a lot of us have these strong beliefs about who we are, what is possible for us, what we can and what we can't do. And a lot of people are really attached to those stories. And so people will come to me and be like, well, I've never told anybody this, but I really want to do this thing, which is so different than anything I've ever done. And I probably couldn't do it because there's an attachment to the story that we tell ourselves. And so oftentimes it takes asking certain questions to get somebody to open up to the possibility that, hey, maybe this thing that you've been believing about yourself your whole life is not really true. And maybe there's something else there that you haven't even been aware of, that you could tap into to actually live a life that you really love. And I think that a lot of people believe that, and I've heard the sentiment that, you can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. And I just don't believe that. And I think what it takes is really defining for yourself what having it all looks like, right? Because having it all is very different for each one of us. And if we're subscribing to society's version of having it all, a lot of us feel like we fall short in that. But having it all for me is like, can I pick my kid up at carpool? Can I, have the freedom to be present as a mother? Can I go to brunch with my girlfriends and, do good things in my business? For somebody else, it's going to be different. But I think when you have an awareness of, wait a minute, this is actually what having it all looks like for me, and I'm going to focus on these things and make that my reality and kind of take it off of my vision board and actually make it real.
Yeah. I think so many times we think about having it all, meaning like everything, even things that we might
Right.
not want. And
Right.
so I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. And I see this a lot in, in people's spending and their behaviors is they're doing a lot of things with their money that they don't care about very much at all.
Right.
And the things that they do say they want to do, the traveling, the spending time with, taking time off, they're not doing them.
Mm-hmm.
But the money is going places and it's
Right.
moving around. But I do think when I've done those exercises myself with like what I actually would really like to do, it's simple. Like maybe I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to get my nails done once a month.
Right.
I can probably find room, but it's not always like, oh, I need to have this bigger house, this car.
Yeah.
Like it's actually sometimes, no, I actually would be pretty excited about. I would like that.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so spending the time to determine that takes time though,
It
and
does.
energy. So how when people maybe that picture is just not that clear. No
Mm-hmm.
clarity around what I do want. I'm just so busy that
Yeah.
I keep moving forward and kind of I mean a lot of people are on autopilot in certain areas of their lives. So
Yeah.
how do we slow down a bit to kind of define things better? Um and what are some ways that if people are like stuck on the I just don't know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that what this
Yeah.
person has, maybe this, like how do you help people get to the root of that those
I
goals for them?
I really believe that clarity starts with challenging who you always have thought and believe that you are. And for me, what I will have clients do is like, tell me about yourself. And people will tell you like it's the truth. Oh, I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I'm an extrovert. I'm talkative. I'm this, I'm that. And, I'm good at math. I'm not good. I'm bad with money. I'm sure you hear that a lot, right? Like there are these, things that we believe about ourselves. And until you're willing to be wrong about yourself, a lot of times you're chasing things that don't even matter to you because you're believing things about yourself that are not true. And so the first thing that I believe needs to be done is an evaluation of who you think you are and whether or not it's actually true and whether or not you want it to be true moving forward. For me personally, I am a middle child. I have always believed I was an introvert. I have a very extroverted older sister and a very introverted younger brother, so I'm in the middle. And I always just believe, well, you're in the background. You play in the background and you should just be quiet and you work hard in the background. And when I felt pulled to be a life coach, that started to challenge me because how do you tell people you can help them if you're in the background and you never speak up? And so I had to start asking myself, okay, am I really introverted like all the time? And I could come up with instances where I'm not an introvert. I can get on a stage and speak in front of people. Now I'm going to go home really quickly after that, but I can speak in front of people. So I had to start pointing out and proving to myself that who I thought I was not necessarily who I actually am or who I want to be. And so clarity in how you want to live your life and what you want in your life comes when you really do a deep dive into who is this person? Who am I? Why do I do the things that I do? And understanding yourself at a really deep level is absolutely step one.
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. There's a lot of roles that a lot of us fall into. Like you said, the middle child. Like as soon as you
Yep.
said that, I'm like, oh, of course. Like you're gonna feel kind of overlooked occasionally. It's kind
Yeah.
of but
No
but it's
baby
funny.
pictures of us.
Yeah, no, of course. Just the baby. But yeah, I feel like that is something that a lot of us have just identified as. And I'll be in business networking groups all the time. People will like tell me about yourself, and it's either like what I do, or they'll be
Yeah.
like the things that people will understand, like, oh, like I'm an introvert. This is my
Mhm.
sign. I'm this is
Mhm.
my human design. Like people will be like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, absolutely. I know you now.
Yeah.
Like that's gotta be
Exactly.
it. But it's definitely a lot more, there's a lot more to it. And I
Mhm.
think it's interesting when you say, what do I think of myself? And I've had people say, I come to me, first thing they tell me I have a spending problem. And then I'll
Mhm.
look at their spending and sometimes in one case, I didn't see it at all. It
Yeah.
didn't look like there was any spending that was going on that
Yeah.
was outside of any like really necessary things. But that was how she felt
Mhm.
for whatever reason led to that point, and she just believed that about herself, and
Yeah.
it was probably holding her back from a lot of things that she could have been doing.
Mhm.
But it's that story can feel very true.
It does. Yeah, it does. I mean, and when it feels very true, it's very clear. The evidence for it shows up everywhere because you're looking for it.
Mhm.
And you're not looking for evidence to the contrary. So even though it's there, you probably won't see it.
Right, and I think that's just getting more prevalent now with the way that we can, the way we look at social media, our feeds, everything's kind of, if we're interested in something or we feel a certain way, or we, maybe we think are an anxious, we have anxiety, or we think they're
Yeah,
this, and then everything will come to us and just be like, yep,
everything.
there we go, absolutely,
Yeah,
just
like echo
confirming what we
chamber.
already think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can hold a lot of people from exploring a different
Right.
possible reality as well. One thing that I read about that I wanted to ask you about specifically, I saw there was two studies, one out of George Washington University, one out of Michigan, that said 12% of young women feel very confident making personal financial decisions.
Mm-hmm.
12%. Now, very young women, I mean that when I read that, it it bothered me because I think about how we build confidence.
Right.
And so somebody who doesn't feel very confident, even if they're younger, 12%, that's a very low number.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then another said that financial literacy and self-confidence play significant roles in how people invest their money, participating in certain investments, or the willingness to invest at all. So I think that all of these things that are coming from maybe a younger age for women,
Mm-hmm.
um, are really holding them back when it comes to trying to build wealth. So,
Right.
what are some of your thoughts when it comes to people who just don't think they're good at it? That they just say, like, oh, I'm not confident. I'm going to let somebody else make these decisions for me, or I'm going to just trust somebody else's opinion without even considering, becoming more confident or learning, because the
Mhm.
financial literacy piece I understand is a more of a global issue, but that self-confidence piece, that's the one that stood out to me, because confidence usually, when I think of some of the ways you build confidence, it's practice. Some people cheer you on from,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm trying to learn how to learn a language or play an instrument or get a certification. People be like, yeah, this, or,
Mhm.
get healthy. And everyone's like, oh my God, you look amazing all the time. But building wealth can be very personal, very
Yes.
quiet. People aren't
Yeah.
talking about it. So what are some ways that women maybe that are out there that are like, yeah, that's me. I don't feel confident making any decisions when it comes to money.
Mhm.
How can they start to build that?
I think dropping some of the shame that a lot of women, a lot of men feel around money, just by saying that, I don't feel confident, is a step up from I'm terrible with money, I'm bad with money, which, is a story a lot of people will tell themselves. And I think acknowledging that you don't feel confident and it's okay, like giving yourself the grace to say, okay, I don't feel confident, but what's important is the now what? right? Okay, I acknowledge I don't feel confident around money. I don't feel confident making financial decisions. Now, what am I going to do? And that goes back to the person that you want to be, right? Being really clear on this is the type of woman that I want to be. This is the type of man that I want to be, and connecting those dots, because the now what is going to be answered by the type of person you want to be. So if I'm a woman who wants to be confident in financial decisions that I make, wants to be confident that when I'm 80 years old, I am taken care of and have what I need, or that I have, wealth to pass on to my children, then I may make the decision and say, I'm going to work with an advisor, but I'm going to make it my business to learn and understand what they're saying and what they're advising me to do versus just handing it over. It really ties back to who do you want to be, even when it comes to financial decisions. Because if you're a woman or a man who's just like, well, I'm not interested in being financially literate, okay, that's fine too. But I think getting to that now what, if you are somebody that truly wants to understand, maybe not become a financial advisor yourself, but you want to understand what they're saying and what people are talking to you about, especially if you intend on building wealth and being comfortable in your finances. So I think it is dropping the shame around, I don't feel confident, and then making a decision about what happens after that.
Yeah. I think that it's so true because the shame part I think is so widespread where some
Mm-hmm.
people don't feel I don't like some people don't feel ashamed at all that they aren't, a great public speaker. They
Right.
just avoid it. They don't care.
Right.
Like or they don't have to do it or if they're not ashamed that they can't cook. Some people might feel
Yeah.
very, very bad about that, and other people don't care at all. But when it comes to the money part, I have yet to come across somebody who, like you said, is just like, yeah, I'm not good with money, so what? That
Mm-hmm.
isn't like either independently wealthy.
Right.
There's usually some amount of guilt. And even people who have had good financial situations and
Mm-hmm.
haven't had the student loan debt and stuff, they feel ashamed about that.
Right.
So there's so much of that shame and guilt that I do feel like there's not there's probably lots more people who want to feel at least at least confident even
Mm-hmm.
if we can't get to very confident that
Yeah.
some of the financial decisions they're making are sound. So I love that idea of just kind of dropping the shame part and
Mm-hmm.
thinking about like, okay, how do I want to feel? Do I
Right.
want to be a
Exactly.
person who has money when they're 80? Do I want to be a person who actually invests? Because the disconnect between people what they think a smart financial decision is investing, spending
Mm-hmm.
below your means, making money. Some people invest in real estate, the stock market, other plenty of ways, businesses is very different than what they actually are willing to do, which
Right.
is usually nothing.
Right.
So that gap, that education gap needs to close. But I thought that was such an interesting study
Mhm.
and it kind of hurt to look at it because there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who are forced to make financial decisions.
Yes.
Forestates, widows, people who maybe their parents have been making the decisions and they lose their parents at some point.
Mhm.
So I think it's by default that most people learn,
Right.
which is
Exactly.
scary
That is
because
scary.
yeah, it's a very
Give it a
important thing.
chance.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I thought it was interesting when I watched some episodes of the show you've done, The Breakthrough, which talks
Mhm.
about a lot of these fears that people
Yes.
have. And it can be very different. I think about acting, dancing, being in public. I think those fears are ones that a lot of us can identify with, but
Mhm.
the core of the issue is the same.
Yes.
So can you tell me a
Absolutely.
little bit more about the show The Breakthrough and, so in your experience as far as working with some of these people and maybe some examples of some of the things that they've kind of had to get over and what was in their heads before they were able to make that leap? Because going on a show is very, very public. And so I
It is.
applaud all of those people who even said they would try. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the show and how you help people there.
Absolutely. So the breakthrough is about individuals who have always wanted to do something. So the examples that you saw on the show where somebody wanted to be an actress, a piano player, a dancer, and wanted to learn how to cook. But for some reason, they never actually did the thing that they really dreamed of doing. And so the breakthrough dives into why. Why have you never learned how to play the piano? Why have you never danced? What's behind that? And understanding, again, what are the things that you think about yourself? What's the block that tells you that it's not possible? What are the stories that you're telling yourself? And really challenging those and kind of pulling them down and having the individual look at it. Is this true? Do you want it to be true? I mean, are you more attached to this story, or would it be better and feel better for you to actually do this thing? And so some of the participants on the show, first of all, 3 of the 4 are friends of mine that I was like, can you do this for me? Or I tricked them and was like, hey, what's something you always wanted to do, but you never did? And then once they told me, I was like, okay, I need you. So, that was part of the first season, but a lot of what is at the core is just this fear of failure and fear of how they're going to be perceived by themselves, by other people. In the case of the young woman who wanted to dance, she thought she was going to look stupid. She's afraid she was going to look stupid. And, the one who wanted to cook was afraid her family was going to judge her because they were, she was like, we're from New Orleans and cooking is a big deal. And if I mess this up, I'll never hear the end of it. So a lot of fears having to do with other people's perception and the fear that we might fail or something is not going to go perfect and go according to plan.
And so I thought it was interesting too, because it wasn't just like, I'll be embarrassed. For one of them, it was like, I'll be embarrassed. Someone will get a video of it. The video will go viral. They will make fun of me until the end of time. Like, I will be like
Yeah,
immortalized as the worst. And it's
like
just amazing
doomsday.
to see like how far our brains will take it to
Absolutely.
keep us from doing anything different.
Absolutely.
Because that scenario happening, I mean, is a possibility, but it's
Possible.
also like not terribly likely
Right.
that, or, I'm sure even with cooking, you could be like, well, then, I do this wrong and then everybody eats it and my whole family dies. Like, you think you could go to this level
Right.
of like extreme and then not necessarily look at like, okay, what could happen if it went really well?
Hmm. Yeah,
Like they so outweigh each other that the way that we want to stay status quo and the same is
absolutely.
remarkable. So I thought it's such an interesting show to watch because all of us have these different fears, whether it's the same as this
Hmm.
person or not, but you can kind of see it when you're watching somebody else talk about it and be like,
Oh
oh
yeah.
yeah, no, she's fine. Just deal
Right.
with it.
It's very clear. And one of the favorite things that I say to myself, that I say to my kids, that I say to my clients, whenever you are attempting to do something new, one, go into it just knowing you're probably not going to be good at it initially,
Mhm.
unless you just have some innate natural talent or skill. Go into it being okay, being bad at it, not being perfect at it. And for a lot of overachievers, that is really difficult. They won't attempt things that they feel like there's a chance they might not get it right the first time. It might not be perfect. They might not get an A plus. And the second thing that is really important when you are, especially, I know a lot of your listeners are probably entrepreneurs or in leadership positions where they have to put themselves out there, and being concerned about what other people think to the point where it stops you from doing things. I always like to tell people, if you're worried about people not supporting you and not liking you, you can stop worrying, because they're not. There is going to be a group of people in a world with what, 7 billion people. Somebody's not going to like you. They're not going to like your hair. They're not going to like your voice. They're going to think you're stupid or corn. Like, whatever you can think of, chances are somebody's going to think that. And you have to weigh whether or not that person, that group of people that don't like you, is more important than you following something that you feel purpose to do, something that you dream about doing. Is it more important? Because on the flip side of that, there are going to be people that love you. There are going to be people that need to hear what you have to say, that support you. And so you get to decide, like, which one are you going to lean into? and which version of yourself, like, are you going to let that dictate how you move and what you do in your life? And I think it's sad. I would be sad to get to the end of my life and say, well, I never did this thing because I was worried like people would think I'm stupid. People
Right.
already think that.
Exactly. Or like, well, I didn't bother anybody.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't
Okay.
sound super appealing, but I do see how much that happens. And then I've also seen research about like how like even when you're young, having one person that like believes in you
Mm-hmm.
changes the trajectory of people's lives.
Yes.
So you think about putting yourself out there or being an example or possibly doing something and being bad at it to start, but then kind of pushing through that. And maybe your kids are watching, or maybe other people are
Yeah.
seeing you do that. That bravery I think can have such an impact. And I think as you go out, like I've had some people say like, oh yeah, they saw you put videos up and it made me want, like I started doing it too. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know this for years, and I think no one's
Exactly.
watching this stuff. This is ridiculous. Why am I doing
Exactly.
this? I should
Yeah.
probably be. And you're not going to know immediately. We don't get that feedback. We don't always know what we're doing, but figuring out whether it's worth it or not to either not offend anybody or not, you know,
Mm-hmm.
have people think that I'm annoying is
Yeah.
worth maybe somebody being like, oh, okay, I opened a high yield savings account and now I'm really happy. Thank you for sharing
Right.
that one tiny little tip, or raising their fees
Exactly.
or doing anything. So I love that like you're helping people just realize that people aren't going to like you anyway. Sometimes
Yeah.
who cares?
Yeah. They
Maybe
probably,
not
and
for
and that's
everybody.
the thing. Like, especially because I work with entrepreneurs
Mhm.
who are, social media is a
Yeah.
thing and they have all these
Huge
thoughts.
thing.
And I'm like, people don't like you when you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
People don't like you already, just and you're not doing anything. So you might as well do what you want to do and let them think whatever they want to think. They are
Yeah.
not your client. They are never going to buy. Okay, so what? Right? And that
Mhm.
takes a lot of build up too, because as humans, we want people to like us. And I think it's okay to acknowledge, I'm going to do this thing. I'm afraid people aren't going to like me. I know people aren't going to like me, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Mhm.
And acknowledge that it doesn't feel good when people don't like you, but it's okay.
It is okay. And also, I think another thing that I've seen on the same lines with entrepreneurs with, say, social media, well, I only have this many people watching,
Right.
or this many people on my email list, or this many people who are actually even paying attention to me. It's not worth it unless I
Right.
have 10,000, 50,000.
Exactly.
And I feel like that has to be, perfect. You know, we forget so much the steps that somebody who started with 100 or 10 had to
Mm-hmm.
take to get to where they're
Yeah.
at now. So, what do you think as far as the importance of these smaller shifts for people when they're trying to go like, well, I'm not going to invest money because I I only have $10. I only have $100. I should have $100,000 for buy now, and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to do it.
It goes back again, and I told you before, it's like everything is going to go back to mindset. It goes back to you deciding who you want to be, and I think really committing to that. So if I decide that I'm somebody who wants to begin to build, to save, to invest, then I have to be okay with small beginnings if that's all I have, right? It's getting in the mindset and being able to convince yourself I'm somebody that invests, right? So if I want to invest and have a huge portfolio, but I never start because I only have $10, then when I try to like do positive affirmations and tell myself, oh, you're somebody who invests and attracts wealth and all that stuff, I'm not going to believe that because it's not true. But if I have $10 and I invest it and I say, here, Misty, I got $10, just help me out here. Then when I'm doing this self-talk and when I am looking at who I am becoming and who I am being, I can say, I'm investing. It may not be at the level I want it to be yet, but I'm an investor. I am building wealth, $10 at a time, right?
Yeah,
Like it
right.
helps provide the evidence that your brain needs to keep you moving. If you just keep saying, I don't have enough, I don't have enough, you're just perpetuating that.
Right. And I think that shift is super important because like you said, I like we're talking to a lot of smart people. people who have degrees, people who have gone to
Mhm.
school, people who have started businesses, make money. Your brain, you're not just going to be able to journal, I am a money magnet
Right.
100 times and the money flows in, because your brain's going to be
Yeah.
like, but you're not.
Right. You're actually not.
But you're actually not, because our brains are like looking for proof. They're looking for some
Right.
evidence. So I love that, the thought of, okay, well, if even if, say, I want to learn how to play guitar, even if like I then get a guitar and I play for 2 minutes a day or whatever, it's tiny steps. It's a
Right.
little bit of proof, because if you say like, oh, I want to invest in real estate, buy a house, and I don't start saving, I don't do any of the things that,
Right.
figuring out what those steps are for somebody who does that, to say,
Yeah.
okay, I would have to perhaps save some money to put down. I'd have to do research. I'd have to look at different things. Like
Mhm.
that gives your brain a little bit more
It does.
to
It gives
cling
you
to.
something to work with. And I think, in this age of everybody putting their business on social media, the good business,
Mhm.
right? Like the wins, the big
Yeah.
successes. I think that a lot of times we're convinced we have to take, massive action.
Yeah.
We have to do these big things.
Mhm.
And the reality is, you got to take a step a day. You're not like, I'm not a runner. I'm not getting ready to go out and run a 52-mile ultra marathon.
Mhm.
Probably never. But, it's going to start with something small. And I think giving yourself permission and relieving yourself of the shame of, oh, I only have this. It's about changing your language. I only have $10 today to invest, but I know if I keep doing this consistently and I stick with it and I embody being somebody who invests, who cares about their money, who cares about financial literacy and learning,
Mhm.
this is going to change. It's
Yeah.
not always going to be this way. And I think it's really about changing the language and being okay with where you are on your way to where you're going.
Yeah. And that's something that I think we've all seen our kids do it. I've
Mhm.
seen my kids be terrible at a lot of different things,
Uh-huh.
including walking, including riding their bikes, including it. And then they continue to go and they continue to
Right.
try. And like, we all know how to learn and we all know
Right.
how to be terrible at the start.
Yes.
We just learn how to avoid it as we get older.
Right.
And everybody lets us get away with it, I think,
Mhm.
because of course, well, that is hard. That is
Yeah, and that's the
complicated.
thing.
I'll do it.
You could get away with it your whole life and nobody will know. Nobody will ever know if I don't build wealth other than my kids at the end of the day when they're like, she didn't leave us anything.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not yeah.
Right? It's not. So at the end of the day, if you let yourself get away with not following through on things that are important to you and that you dream about, then you're the one that's really going to suffer at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you help people. I know you have the Dangerous Women Society and you help people one-on-one. So tell me, like in your words, what you mean by a dangerous woman, and how this and how your society works, in case somebody's out there being like, yeah, I'm a little sick of myself. I got to do this. I want to change. I'm tired of just kind of going through the motions when it comes to life. So
Mhm.
tell me more about your coaching and how it works.
Yes, I love to say, dangerous woman is not like dangerous that's going to get you locked up. This is like dangerous in terms of having the confidence, being able to feel all of your emotions and still do the things that you want to do, being able to live a life where you allow yourself to feel the highs, to feel the lows, to not try to avoid anything, and you create that life that is your I have it all life, right? Where you're not afraid to do these things. And even when you're afraid, you still take steps and you still take action. And so a lot of the work that I do is with female entrepreneurs who have successful businesses, but they feel like something else is kind of off kilter. They also want to be really amazing moms, really amazing wives. They want to, do these other things, but they feel stuck. And it's not just with entrepreneurs because a lot of people feel this way. And so the work that I do really starts with, let's look at one, who you think you are, and two, where is your life now and where do you want it to be? And why is it that you're not living that life, and what is in the way of that? And 9 times out of 10, what's in the way of it is the stories that we tell ourselves, the things that we think about ourselves, the things that we think are possible. And so the work that I do is in uncovering that. It's like peeling back onion layers. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at that. It is not, as you know, therapy. You're not getting on a couch. I am not her. I am not a therapist. But what I do is help clients really look at, how is this thinking that you have had affected your life, impacted the way that you live now, and how do you want that to change? And so it's a lot of really looking in the mirror, and being honest with yourself in a way that is not mean, that isn't cruel, that isn't beating yourself up, and really learning how to go through life and experience life in a full way, where it's like, you're not running away from fear and possible disappointment and all of these other things, because you know how to handle them and get back up and be stronger when you do get back up. So that's what we do. I'm a
Yeah.
life coach. So,
No, I love it. And I think
how
it
do we
is,
do
it's,
life better?
this is why, and, it's important to, therapy is a totally different, that is kind of looking, backwards. And I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of people can benefit from both, or maybe
Yes.
they don't need that. Maybe they need, but what I like about, the programs you're running, the one-on-one coaching too, it's hard work. So
Mm-hmm.
if no one's holding you accountable and no one else is kind of there, and I think that's where the coaching part can be so helpful for people, is
Yes.
because we're way more likely to let ourselves down than somebody else who's also going to show up and talk to
Right.
us and actually cares. And so that's where I think that whole piece of it, whether it's a group setting, whether it's one-on-one, can be so
Mm-hmm.
beneficial for people, because this is not easy.
It's not easy. I mean, and I have a client that is an Olympian. Like, she literally has a gold medal, and some of the things that she struggles with mindset wise are the same things that my clients who are entrepreneurs, or some of my friends who are stay-at-home moms, like, it's the same thing. It's different levels to it, and the way that you respond to certain feelings is different for everybody.
Mhm.
And so I love being able to help show people themselves at a deeper level, so they can understand and then make choices, make different choices based on understanding themselves so much more clearly.
Yeah. No, it's important work. I think all of us, and if you're somebody and you're thinking about this and then you're just like, well, but I can't afford it. I think this is one of the areas, and I tell my clients this a lot, when it comes to their mental health, when it comes to even their health and wellness, and how they take care of themselves. Like, that is an area that I think we tend to neglect in our budget,
I
because we
agree.
think, oh, but I have to do this for somebody else, or I think I should be we tend to kind of put ourselves last on the list. But
Yes.
when that is gone, when, we don't have time, or we've put off doing all these things for ourselves to actually feel more confident, or capable, or happy.
Mm.
Um, that is one of those things that you can't buy back,
Right.
unfortunately. So I think
Right.
it's just one of those things. If it's something you've been thinking about for this year, I do think investing in yourself and your own brain, that is probably one of the biggest areas of my personal budget.
Mm-hmm. Mine
And I
too.
think it pays off. I do think it's something that, it's not a quick fix. No one's going to solve anything it's not an easy solution, but I do think
Mhm.
that if you're willing to, invest in your own brain, it can change so many other things that are going on
Yes.
everywhere else in your life. So I think that's it definitely, it's something to consider, even if you're just learning and listening, even listening to this podcast, listening to Krystal's podcast. I think it can open up your eyes in so many ways about how you might be really letting the thought of what other people might think might be controlling your life far more than it
Mhm.
actually should be. So, Krystal, thank you so much for joining me today. How can people find you? How can they find the show if they want to follow you and listen in and learn more? Because you're putting out some amazing content, and you're definitely a fun person to follow.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am on TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, so all the social medias, Facebook at Dr. Krystal Conner. The podcast is How to Be a Dangerous Woman, and it's on all the streaming platforms. And the show The Breakthrough, the easiest way to find it is through YouTube. It is on the AIB network, and we will be back for season 2. So hopefully you can watch all the episodes.
I love it. All right. Well, we'll have to tune in. We'll have to watch season 1. And then anybody, yeah, if you're out there listening and you're like, I want to be on season 2, we'll make sure that we let you know
Oh,
when that is
yeah.
airing, when they're looking for those people who need to maybe have a breakthrough themselves. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Krystal, for joining me today. And
Thank
thank you so
you.
much, everyone, for listening. We'll talk again next week.